Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about equivalent expressions with negative numbers and equivalent expressions with negative numbers and variables. So let's start with the first one with just equivalent expressions with negative numbers. So let's do a few examples together. It says, which of the following expressions are equivalent to 8 4/5 plus 3, and then in parentheses we have 3 2/10 minus 1 1/5. So notice that in the answer choices, all the numbers are rearranged. So what you need to remember is that your 8 4/5 is ultimately, let me switch to pen. Your 8 4/5 should be a positive. Your 3 2/10 should also be a positive. And your 1 1/5, because it's got that subtraction in front of it, should technically be a negative. So looking at answer choice A, I can see that everything here is positive. So I know it can't be A because 1 1/5 should stay a negative. And here I can see that my 8 4/5 is positive, my 3 2/10 is positive, and I'm adding a negative 1 1/5. So my 1 1/5 is still a negative. So the correct answer here would be answer choice B. Let's try another one. Which of the following expressions are equivalent to 4 plus, and then in parentheses, 14 minus 2? Now, this one doesn't have fractions involved with it, so it would be easy enough to solve it and then just check to see which one gives you the same answer. Remember, your order of operations is PEMDAS, which means that you're doing your parentheses first, which means we'd be left with 14 minus 2 is 12, and 4 plus 12 gives us 16. Well, clearly I can see that 4 plus 16 is not going to give us that same answer. In B, I've got 4 minus 14, which would be a negative 10. And a negative 10 minus 2 clearly is negative 12, so it's not going to be B either. You could also look at it as 4 should be a positive, 14 should be a positive, and 2 should be a negative. So the correct answer here would be C. Okay, let's just review a little bit of notes before moving into the next one. So what do we call it when we have a number outside of parentheses? Well, that is what we call distribution. And distribution means that you are multiplying. So let's take a look at this example. Notice I've got 3 on the outside, and then typically we draw these little arrows so you don't forget to distribute through. By distribute, we mean multiply. 3 times 8 is 24, and 3 times 2 is 6, and 24 minus 6 would leave me with an answer of 18. Here, notice that instead of having a number, I actually have a negative sign. A negative sign functions like a negative 1 on the outside. So technically, your negative is still going to get distributed. And as I have in the notes down here, all that happens when you have a negative on the outside of your parentheses, once you distribute it, it's going to turn everything inside your parentheses to the opposite. So think about it. Negative 1 times 4 is now a negative 4. A negative 1 times a negative 3 is now a positive 3. Whoops. And then a negative times a positive 8 is now a negative 8. So all that happens when you distribute that negative is that everything on the inside gets turned to the opposite side. So let's try an example of this. It says, which of the following expressions are equivalent to negative 19 plus 3 and then minus 6? So we've got a negative 19, we've got a positive 3, and we've got a negative 6. So let's take a look at A. Notice there's 3 correct answers, negative 19, positive 3, and negative 6. So A would work. B, negative 19, positive 3, and negative 6. So B would also work. Here I can tell that C is not correct because my 3 is a negative, and it should be a positive. Now here's where we see that negative on the outside. So I'm going to have to actually rewrite this one. So my positive 19 becomes a negative 19. My negative 3 becomes a positive 3. And my positive 6 becomes a negative 6, which is exactly what we were looking for. So D would also be correct. Let's just finish up with E because again, you've got that negative on the outside of your parentheses. So we need to distribute that. So that means my 19 becomes a negative, my 3 becomes a negative, and my 6 stays a negative because that's on the outside, which clearly that's not what we're looking for. Let's try another one. Which of the following expressions are equivalent to negative 8/11 minus 3/4 minus 1/4? So we've got a negative, and a negative, which looking at your answer choice A, notice negative, 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 so A works. Again, we're picking 3 answers. B, you've got that negative on the outside, so we have to distribute. So that's going to leave me with a negative 8/11, a positive 3/4, and a positive 1/4, which is not what we're looking for. Here, I've got this double negative, which if I were to do keep, change, that would become plus 3/4 minus 1/4. So that's not what we're looking for. So it has to be D and E by default, but let's just check them. So we have to distribute our negative in D. So that's going to leave me with negative 8/11, negative 3/4, and negative 1/4, which is correct. And then here you've got this other negative again that you're going to have to distribute. So that's going to leave you with negative 3/4 and negative 1/4, which is what we were looking for. All right, the next skill is very similar, except now not only are there negative numbers, but there's also some variables involved. So it says, which of the following expressions are equivalent to, in parentheses, x plus 0 plus y plus 0? Well, think about it. 0 plus 0 is just 0. So really, this is the same thing as saying just x plus y, which, as you can see, answer choice A would work. And here, it's basically the same thing as what they gave us, just rearranged a little bit differently. They put the parentheses in a different spot. So this would also be equivalent to x plus y. So both of these would be correct answers, which it does say choose all answers that apply. Let's try the next one. Which equations are true? Well, take a look at your first one. Notice that I've got a negative x and a positive x, which functions the same as a negative 5 and a positive 5. And when we have opposites, they always combine to equal 0. So these would basically just cancel each other out, leaving us with x plus 0 or just x. So that one's true. Same thing here, 0 plus 0 is 0. So that would also leave you with basically just x equals x. So in this case, both A and B would be correct answers. Let's try another one. Again, we're looking at which equations are true. Well, 0 plus negative x is going to leave me with negative x equals x, which that is not true. And then here you've got keep, change. So that's going to be a positive x equals a positive x, which is true. So B would be the correct answer for this one. The correlating note-taking packet pages are pages 22 through 25, just through the top of the page. Again, you can watch the videos in Khan Academy if you would like to see additional examples. And please feel free to email myself or Mr. Lab with any questions you may have. Have a great day, everyone.